And welcome everyone to this week's episode of Trek Central Weekly, where I am Commander Dom, and we are here to talk about the latest Strange New Worlds episode 9, All Those Who Wander, which was a very interesting episode, and I'm very interested to talk about it with not only all you in chat, so let us know what you think of this episode, but also my fantastic co-hosts. So, before we start, let's introduce our co-hosts. Let me do that. So yes, Faru.
Howdy. I am Fathery of the Text Trek YouTube channel and podcast. I'm happy to be here today on this lovely holiday weekend here in the States.
Yeah, very nice. Yes. Oh. Is everything
sorry.
okay? Yeah?
Yes.
Or is it frozen?
I
Okay.
couldn't hear you guys. Maybe it got frozen for a second. Sorry.
Yes.
Yes, this is Starfleet Boy. I'm here. I'm excited to talk about this episode with y'all. And it is also the same holiday for me because I'm in the States as well. So that's pretty cool.
Yes.
We might have had some atmospheric interference with our communications.
Yes.
It happens. So.
It does happen, as it happens in this episode, where our valiant crew have to go to a really desolate planet to rescue the USS Peregrine from something that's happened on board, which has caused them to crash. So I'm sure there are a lot of things we can discuss about this episode. Would anyone like to... Well, actually, I guess I really want to say it's weird that the USS Peregrine is basically a Constitution class, but it's now a Sombra class. It's made from Constitution parts, and instead of the red striping on the side, it's got blue striping. But what did you think of the fact that they just didn't use a Constitution class and just made a new one?
It seemed like a odd choice. I would have loved to have seen a new ship design, or even a familiar ship design. You know, I think they still could have solved the obvious budgetary problem of using the same sets. They didn't want to build brand new sets for a brand new ship, but, you know, a different class of ship could easily have the similar looking interiors. I felt like they redressed them enough that, you know, I would have believed it if it was a ship that looked pretty different, but... Well,
yeah,
so
and I think
made me a little
would have
sad
been,
as a ship nerd.
It would have been nice to, I guess, see like a Discovery era ship. And I know it's kind of like, you know, we're only a year out of that, but you know, there was a lot of really beautiful ship designs in there. You know, we had 9 new ship types in the Battle of Binaries alone, probably more, just from the Federation side. So it would have been nice to see like a Nimitz class or a Shepherd class,
Daedalus.
or Daedalus. I mean, that would have been a new
Oh,
model.
Daedalus would have been
Daedalus would have been
awesome.
nice.
I would have loved a crashed Daedalus.
Ooh, yeah.
The missed opportunity there.
Yes, very much. And yeah, it's very interesting that, you know, this episode, you know, it is just basically a Constitution class, whereas, you know, we got the USS Archer in the first episode, which was a brand new ship. There was a brand new ship in the space dock, also in episode 1, which looked like a Miranda class. And even in episode 1, there were some Discovery era ships behind the Enterprise. And with reusing the sets of the Enterprise, they could have just said, oh yeah, the interior was just refit after the war. Easy.
If I'm remembering my Star Trek technical manual from the original series correctly, and I may not, I'm probably not remembering it correctly, Dom, the ship that looks like the TOS Enterprise also was called a heavy cruiser class at one point, or a starship class, I think, or something like that. So, you know, the class... So there is precedence, I guess. Now it's on screen, so it's canon. For ships that look exactly the same to have different classes.
Yeah.
And there's now perhaps it's because of the function that a class gets. It's not because of the look. So maybe the Peregrine had a different function than a Constitution did.
Okay.
Sure, it works within universe, but just it have been your preference as a fan to have gotten a different ship design. I know for me it would have been anyways.
Starfleet
It's a lot
Boy,
better
I have
than
some
Enterprise.
people saying that you're a little quiet. I've turned you up my end, but it says.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Testing
no.
1, 2, 3. Audience,
So
tell me how that sounds,
just let us know in comments if in the live chat if
and
that's issue.
I'll get a little closer to the
But
mic
yes,
too.
Farfree, what were you saying?
I mean, it's better than the Enterprise episode Unexpected when they needed a Klingon ship in the 22nd century, and they're like, "Hey, let's just drop in
Oh
this
God, yes.
Katinga CGI model that we used on DS9 and Voyager. Let's just drop that in
Well,
here in the
yeah,
22nd
I mean,
century."
Enterprise had a lot of that issue, I guess, with then Voyager models, because they would use models in that were ships in the Delta Quadrant, and then be like, "Oh yeah, they're in the Alpha Quadrant 200 years prior." So you were just kind of like, I know why you're doing that, but it's just like kind of weird.
Right. Something we don't see a ton of that type of issue anymore. That these shows have bigger budgets and a lot better time constraints. Like they only do 10 episodes a year, whereas in the old days it was 26. So yeah, they have more time, more money. But still, it just would have been cool to see like a little bit of a different ship design, or just go ahead and let it be a Constitution. The ship is retrieved at the end. It could even be one of the Constitutions we saw in the original series. You know, the ship is the crew might be dead.
Yeah.
The ship lives after the episode, though.
Yeah, and we've got 12 different ships, Constitution classes in the original series. You know, it can't be the Intrepid because that's like a whole Vulcan crew. But it could have been another. Any of them.
Yeah, it could have been the Exeter or the Constitution itself.
Defiant.
Yeah, so they had options, but not a huge deal. I like the redressed.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying how sad it would have been if it were like a ship. Like, what's the one in the Doomsday episode? Is that
Constitution? With
that's
Decker?
the Constellation, isn't it?
I thought it was
yeah, how sad would it have been if Constellation lost her crew twice.
Yeah.
Well, you can then say the same about the Defiant.
That's true. That's true, actually. You're right.
It's not really that safe being on a Constitution class, considering how many Constitution classes got destroyed in the original series. Because that was basically the only Starfleet ship you see in the original series. But, I mean, you know, someone brought up a great comment. Kevin in the chat said, I think we've seen more new ships in 9 episodes of Strange New Worlds than all of Season 1 of TNG. And, you know, we've gotten different types of ships from the where the people from the planet where they sacrificed the child. I forgot their name. The Magellans? The Magellans.
Oh yeah, the Magellans.
They have the shuttles, the
Magellans.
one with the turret. You have a lot of other ships, so we are getting a lot and a lot of cool ships. But
Gorn ships.
Gorn. So we should probably then talk about the Gorn. That's a great segue. Thank you. So yeah, this episode, for those who did not watch this episode, which why have you not, and why are you watching this live stream if you haven't watched the episode? But it was basically our first in the flesh appearance of the Gorn in Strange New Worlds after their ship appearances in episode 4. So Starfleet Boy, I'll ask you first, what did you think about the fact that they brought in the Gorn in the flesh in this episode?
My initial thought when I first watched it, even though they were very effective in terms of the design and the scary factor and everything, was I was originally a little bit disappointed because I really have a strong attachment to the aesthetic that they presented in TOS. However, after thinking about it and talking about it and with folks online and stuff like that, I've come to the realization that we don't really have the whole picture, and this could just be a cool new aspect of the Gorn. My personal thought process is that perhaps the Gorn have different castes or even, different subsets, just like the Andorian and the Aenar within their species, and that the Gorn that we saw, so the Metrons in TOS were like, oh, we're going to pit captain against captain, but maybe that wasn't really what the Gorn would do in a battle situation. Maybe they send down these vicious warrior Gorn to do the dirty work, and that the captain was
They send their
different.
babies to the front lines.
Well, no, who knows what this grows into, like and then there's some really clever ideas out there about, like, since they have such wild differences from, like, when they go from egg to this, like, little, vicious little tiny thing to, like, this, like, kind of hunter, all within the span of a few hours. So maybe the Gorn go through wild, every time they molt, they change and evolve very quickly. So I just started not thinking about them in terms of our own development. I just started to go, how wild can they possibly go with the Gorn? And the sky's the limit, really. Like, they could, one thing we always assume the Gorn are reptilian, but what if they're a hybrid of insectoids and reptilians? And they have, like, hierarchies similar to how insects, like ants, do. Like with like a worker class and a this and that, and so on and so forth. So lots of thoughts, and so once I started thinking about that, I felt a lot better about this introduction of this new iteration of the Gorn, and I really enjoyed it.
So one thing that's interesting, which you kind of spoke about, was what if they're not fully reptilian, if they're a mixture of, a couple of different species, and if you freeze frame the scene where M'Benga is showing off his analysis of the Gorn tissue, it actually says that their cerebral cortex is very mammalian in nature and not that much like reptilian. So that could be an aspect that they're bringing in. But Favre, what did you think about the fact that they introduced the Gorn in the flesh in this episode?
Sure. Just before I get into my opinion on that, I just want to add to what you were saying about possible mammalian Gorn. A lot of people made a big deal out of Lower Decks when we see the Gorn wedding. We see Lady Gorn that are bustier than the male Gorn. So that would also suggest they might have some mammal traits if they make milk for their young. However, that being said, I thought that this episode was very well made. I said on my stream Friday, I thought it was a great episode on paper. But as far as, like, using the Gorn in this way and the depiction of the Gorn, it's not what I want from the Gorn. So I was disappointed. This is the first episode of Strange New Worlds that was a full-on disappointment for me. And I'm not saying that it's bad. It's just this isn't what I want.
What you want
with Gorn, as someone who grew up a fan of the original series, who was always curious about the Gorn, always wanted to see more of them. And what I love about Arena is it's such a quintessential Star Trek episode. Yes, there's the barrier of, can I take this seriously with a guy in a corny rubber suit? But, if you get over that and accept the 1960s aesthetics and the style of the time, it's a really brilliant piece of science fiction that was so trailblazing in 1966, where a lot of your science fiction, especially things that were, TV or movies that would be, like, a little less cerebral than a lot of the literature. But, it would basically be like these daring men in space versus the bug-eyed monsters. And Star Trek came along, and with Arena was like, no, look, like, this isn't just a monster, it's a creature. There's a little bit of nuance here. Same thing with the Horda in Devil in the Dark. Or even, like, a bit with, the Man Trap. They still kind of sympathize with the salt vampire in that episode. And it was a very unique thing that Star Trek had of showing, that there's more nuance, that there's more to these other life forms than, just black and white, good guys versus monsters type stuff. And the idea of, very alien life or very different life. And a very simple, kind of on-the-nose story of, just overcoming your prejudices. Yes, it looks like a scary lizard man, but it's actually just a dude who is captain of his ship, like I'm captain of my ship, and I don't have to kill him. So, yeah, a simple story, but an important story, and this just undermines all of that. This episode is just like, nope, they're just, like, straight-up xenomorphs from Alien. They're pure monsters, and you have to kill them before they kill you. So that makes me kind of sad. I feel like we've taken some steps backward. As slickly produced and as beautiful and as scary and as good of a job as they did making this episode, it was just not what I wanted with the Gorn.
Yes, definitely. I can understand that. Before I say something, Joel in chat says, let's remind Favre about the word younglings being introduced. I
wasn't going to bring it up.
Dislike that from the prequels, but yes, they do mention that these Gorn babies are younglings.
Yep.
Which
Yeah, that was a
is
that was a
choice.
word that was said.
It was a
By
word
the
that was
way,
said, and I loved it.
I just want to throw out one
Yeah.
thing. There might be a precedence or like a clue as to the way the Gorn operate in that they're called the Gorn hegemony or hegemony. I'm not
Mm.
sure how that word is said,
Hegemony.
but hegemony. Thank you. But basically, it means leadership or dominance, especially by one country or social group over others. So it's an interesting
Yeah.
thing, and they are causing trouble all the way up into the 30th century. So
Yeah,
so
definitely.
there's that.
So from my point of view, I was very much like Favre in that this wasn't what I particularly wanted from the Gorn. When we saw these gremlin-like creatures in the trailers, because you see a shot of the puppet, the Gorn baby puppet, in one of the trailers, I was like, oh, that's not a Gorn. It's just gonna be like a gremlin episode. Okay. And lo and behold, it was the Gorn episode as well as episode 4. But going into that, a lot of the like beta canon from the books and comics and everything usually has the Gorn as not just one species but multiple species, referred to as the Gorn as a whole. And in some instances, they're all reptilian species that grew up on the same planet, kind of like the Zindi. In others, they're just from neighboring planets and they just joined together to become the Gorn. So you could definitely, if it makes you feel better, just view this as these are a different subsect of the Gorn to the ones that Kirk meets in the arena. But one thing I thought that was really interesting, which could probably link this introduction and iteration of the Gorn into the first season of Strange New Worlds, is that the first season of Strange New Worlds has talked a lot about genetic engineering and genetic manipulation, and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if actually these particular Gorn were actually genetically modified to be like this? And it would link into how, we've had the Illurians, we've had La'an talking about Khan, even to the Magellans modifying a child to fulfill the purpose of power generator. And I think that would make the whole season more cohesive as this look on genetic manipulation. You've even got M'Benga saying, oh, for some reason, from birth, they're able to not be detected by sensors. They're modified in this way. And you could see that as either genetic manipulation, but even from episode 4, La'an talked about the Gorn as this survival of the fittest, about they need the strongest traits to survive. So it's more we'll kill the weak ones and let the strong ones breed. So we could be looking at a cult or a subsect of the Gorn that are very much like that. We need to have the best soldiers, and this is just what they've produced. And I think, from myself, that is really cool. Which I would like.
Could even be a third party.
Yeah.
It might not even be like the Gorn engineering them. That could be like some mad scientist from Romulus who's like, I'm gonna engineer the perfect Gorn killers or something.
The quadrant, their next tactic. That would actually be really cool. And then you could have an episode where they find out that it's the Romulans doing it, or the Zenkethi doing it, or whatever. And then
I'd love the Zenkethi to come in.
Have it be struck from the record, be confidential, because they're like, we can't really tell the Federation Council that the Romulans are back on the galactic stage, because they shouldn't be. And then that will still keep the balance of terror aspect of we're back alive, but yet keep up to date with what Enterprise did, where it was like, the Romulans are messing with the Vulcans, and they've got a man on the inside right at the top. So yeah, that's actually a really nice idea, which I would like to see happen. Will it happen? Probably not, but it's still nice to think about and talk about and discuss. But yeah.
It just goes to show that there are many ways to hatch a Gorn.
Yeah, there are many ways. A lot of people say, this contradicts canon and everything, but you can, and the writers can, use a lot of imagination to get around that.
Sure. Yeah, and I think it's easier to do that, if you like the story. I know for me, like, I always say if the mental gymnastics of like finding these headcanon solutions to things, if it was an Olympic event, I'd get a gold medal in it every 4 years. Like
Yep.
I'm great at coming up with some crazy
Yeah.
theories to make these things connect and line up, but it's a lot easier to do that when you really like the story. If it's something that bothers you, it kind of any criticism you have kind of is larger when you're not having a good time watching it. So but yeah, I mean, you can say that with like the Spock into Pring stuff, or like Spock mind melding with La'an,
Yes.
and there's a few things in here that kind of seem like they directly violate something established in the original series. But if you're a little creative, it's not that hard for fans, or even something the writers can address in the future to correct. And Star Trek's always required a little bit of creative thinking with stuff like that. Going all the way back to the original series contradicted itself. The next generation, watch the first 2 seasons of TNG. They were still trying to figure out the 24th century. Wesley Crusher saying the Klingons are part of the Federation and all kinds of nonsense like that. So yeah, they don't always have it all figured out, but we can. That's part of the fun, I think, of these big shared universes and these long tapestry, these long 56 years of continuity type franchises. That's part of the fun, is making it all fit together, at least for me.
Yeah, and talking about, these really long franchises and how these new things can connect and enhance future aspects, I guess we should talk about Uhura, who is a very vital part of this episode. Correct me if... Wait, who was it who did the personnel log at the beginning of the episode?
It was
Uhura.
It was Uhura. Okay, I thought so.
Yeah.
So, just from that, it hasn't been always one-to-one, but we can very much tell that the person who puts in a personal log at the beginning is usually the focus of the episode. But what did you think about what this episode did for Uhura as a character, especially because of how she was introduced in the series as not really knowing her place, and then by the end of this episode, knowing where she belongs. So what did you think? Favre, we'll start with you.
Well, first of all, I thought it was cool right at the beginning when she said K7. I was like, oh my god, K7! Trouble with Tribbles, Trials and Tribulations. I'd love to see K7 at some point in the course of the show. But, it's not really much of a surprise, is it? Like at the end when like she's staring at the communications station, like, oh my god, Uhura decides she wants to stay on the Enterprise. Who saw that coming? but no, like, in all seriousness, I enjoyed the arc they've given her over season 1 of being someone who was, unsure and uncertain. Just the wonderful moment in the second episode of the show in Children of the Comet, when they're again, having food at Pike's, and he asks her, tell us a little bit about yourself. She starts talking about like her parents, her grandparents, how many languages she speaks, why she came into Starfleet, being unsure about being there. And just that one tiny exchange, just a couple lines of dialogue, we got so much more depth to Uhura than we got in the entire 3 seasons of the original series, 2 seasons of the animated series, and then 6 movies she was in. I loved that they gave the character the spotlight finally. It felt like Uhura deserved it so much. And it's also very different from the Kelvin timeline Uhura, who was very confident and sure of herself. So, here we have a younger, maybe even more relatable, uncertain Uhura who learns the importance of finding your home through Hemmer. And we got to see, it gave the character Hemmer, something to do about, he's teaching her, you're really good at like forming these bonds, but more importantly, you need to be good at like planting your roots and then finding a place to grow and then excel there. And so it gave him something to do before. I'm sure we'll get into that later. So I thought that was a cool culminate. It's a small arc, it's not anything groundbreaking. Like I said, not shocking at all, but it was satisfying to me as an original series fan, growing up, someone who's always liked these characters. Thought it was cool that, look, they did something with Uhura and it paid off.
Yeah, definitely. Starfleet Boy, what did you think about Uhura? And not just her focus in this episode, but her focus in Stranger Worlds as a whole.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Father. I think it was very, although we already knew what was going to happen, it was really delightful to see her go through this journey, and as was pointed out, like to get so much more information about this beloved character than we've ever had between this and like the backstory that they give her in Star Trek Picard that you don't even see on screen. It's just like on a placard, but it's still like lovely that that Star Trek is giving us more information, more quote unquote, I guess, canonical information about Uhura. And that scene was particularly touching at the end where she walks onto the bridge and looks over at the, I guess, what would be the communications station or that part of the, of the bridge and just kind of like, like that's her destiny, and you hear all the like cool sound, the TOSE sounds and
Yes.
stuff, and like it was just really well done. And then I loved Hemhura. Is that what it was, right? I
Yeah, I
keep
think so.
forgetting
Yeah,
how
Team
they put it.
Himhura.
Which
Yeah,
amazing.
I love Team Hemhura. Like to me, they really did a good job of their connection and showing the the mentorship between Hemmer and Uhura. I loved Hemmer. I know we're going to talk about him, but
Mm,
I love that he will live on through Uhura. Hemmer, like all good mentors, really changed her heart, changed her mind, and helped her to, at least for now, realize that maybe she can overcome that fear and put down roots. And we know that she'll be there for like 60 years. But still,
yeah.
it's a fun it's a fun thing to see realized, and to add color. So now, whenever I watch TOS, I'm just gonna think about Uhura and Hemmer, and I like that. Like
Mm.
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, Kevin Richardson points out in the chat that, not only do we in Strange New Worlds see Uhura's basically starting point, but in Star Trek Picard, we learn that Uhura became a captain of the
Yeah,
USS Leon de Grance, I believe. Um,
Leon Grants, yeah, or
yes.
Leon de Grants. I've been saying it Leon Grants, but I guess that's a good. Now I know. I think I trust your pronunciation because
Well,
it's British. So.
I'm guessing, but yeah. So
Who is
we've
King?
got a lot of stuff from Uhura for this.
By the way, the name of the ship is after the Guinevere's father. So that's in
Which
Arthurian
I
legend.
think
Oh,
Yeah.
Patrick Stewart played him in a
Yes.
play or something. Um,
Yes.
Excalibur. No, it was the movie Excalibur, right?
No. He did play King Leon Grace
oh,
in.
it was there.
Yes, that's right. You're right. That's who he
He
is. I
tries he
forgot about
tries to
that.
pull the sword from the stone and he
Yeah,
can't do it.
and he can't do it.
Yes.
But you're absolutely right. And a young Jean-Luc Picard did his first warp flight aboard that ship with
Yes.
Uhura in command. So that's a really
Yeah, she
cool
remained in command
additional
while it
yeah
became a academy ship.
training. Yeah,
Yeah.
like a training type vessel. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He was like, "Hey, Ensign or Cadet Picard, come over here. Let me tell you about this dude Hemmer. One time, he had a bunch of Gorn loaded up in him, and he had to jump out of a ship and die.
Oh my god,
Pretty sad."
actually a that's actually a possibility that Picard knows about Hammer. Wow. Uh, but yeah, I think Uhura, just in Strange Worlds has been great, and Celia Rose Gooding has done an exceptional work
Hmm.
Yeah,
playing as, this person who is kind of immortalized as Nichelle Nichols. So she does an excellent job of living up to that and stepping in her shoes and going that extra step, which has just been
Dom, I'd like
amazing.
to
Yeah.
Dom, I'd like to highlight another of Kevin Richardson's
Yes.
comments because it really touched me too. I was moved profoundly by this too, but Picard saying that Uhura became a captain literally made me cry. It also affected me very emotionally. I think that was like a wonderful thing for people who love that character, and
Yes.
yeah, so yeah, lots of Uhura getting her flowers after all this time is
Yeah.
really nice.
And I really, really,
Yeah.
really love that they paired her with Hemmer, because she has a lot in the original series. She has this engineering know-how. She fixes the communications station in one of the episodes. I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
But the fact that now watching that episode, you're going to be like, I know probably where she learnt that, is actually amazing. But I guess, we've avoided it long enough, but we have to talk about Hema, who, unfortunately, spoiler alert for those who may not know in chat, he dies in this episode. Wow, big spoiler. But
Yep.
I did not expect it, but I would say that, it made me emotional, the fact that learning all the way back in episode 4, his purpose in life is to fix what is broken, and he will not die until that happens. And then we find out that the thing he fixed was Uhura's heart, and that's just like I'm even tearing up right now saying that. That's really sweet, and it's a shame that they sacrificed Hema for that, for Uhura basically as a character. Luckily, however, we did hear recently in an interview with Bruce Horak, I saw some people asking in the chat, that Bruce Horak, who plays Hema, is not finished in Star Trek.
Right.
So he will be back in some role or another, whether he plays Hema's twin brother, or just without the prosthetics. Who
Is that
knows?
a thing with the Anar, by the way? They're born twins? Are they all? Or
No,
there's
it's
a lot
just
of
making
twins?
that up.
Oh, okay. Just making it up. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like
But
that.
yeah,
like
I mean,
that.
I saw a lot of people were sad to lose Hema, and especially, a lot of people want Strange New Worlds to be Pike's show, and they're worried that, now with Hema gone, they're gonna bring in Scotty, and they're going to slowly but surely make it the original series. But before we talk about that,
Right.
Let's talk about just Hema, and Starfleet Boy. What did you think about Hema in this episode? Did you want him to go? Did you not want him to go? Do you accept it? Do you not accept it? All these questions.
Good questions. So first, I totally did not expect him to go. That caught me off guard. I didn't want him to go. He's one of my favorite new characters that were introduced on Strange New Worlds, and I was really digging the idea that this would be this character would be a lot like how Spock was the alien character, and we would get to really find out some interesting things about Andorians and NR and just like I wanted him to get more alien and more weird and cool, and stuff like that. So I was looking forward to more Hammer, and I was even imagining what more concepts they could do, and maybe visit to Andoria and stuff like that. That being said, his death was very good. It was a noble, I think they wrote him a really good arc this season, as well as a really good death. It was very noble. There's nothing else. There's nothing anyone else wouldn't have done the same thing. It's the right action, so to speak. He knew his body really well. He knew these things were about to hatch at any moment. There's no time to do all the things everyone was suggesting, suspend their growth or anything like that. It would have led to disaster, and Hemmer knew that. So he made the exact right choice. But on top of that, just I think it's important to, sometimes in a show that doesn't have a lot of opportunities for stakes. I think this is where they can really lean in on it, is things I hope they don't do it too much. I hope we don't start losing all these characters, that every time you introduce a new character, they're gonna die at the end of the season or anything like that. That being said, I am to your point about the Pike show, I do have that concern as well. I love the characters from the original series, but I don't need to see them quickly. It's okay to wait till towards the end of the show to start seeing more of these folks show up. So even though it's going to be a delight, obviously, to see some legacy characters come back, it's also a little frustrating because I also do want to meet new characters and explore characters that were underserved, such as Uhura and Chapel. I like that mix, but I don't necessarily know if Scotty was underserved enough to bring him in.
No. And it is Strange New Worlds, but we'd like some strange new characters.
Yes.
And Hemmer was exactly one of them. you know, and Einar,
Yeah.
who only appears in Enterprise. That's really cool. But yeah, I mean, if there was another species that you would like to join the Enterprise, what would it be then? For a new character.
I would like to see what's the name of the animated series species
Edosian?
that the Edosians. Yeah, I would
With
love to
Arax?
see.
Oh, like Eric's?
Yeah.
Yeah, like Eric's. I would love to see.
I would love to
Edosian
see that. I would even be fine with seeing Arax, because that would be really cool.
himself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it would be
that would work.
interesting how they would do it in live action, because, you know, he's got...
Well, having seen
Great arms and stuff.
Buckley in this episode, I
Yes.
think they could pull it off to look really good with a combination of CG and
Well, you
practical
probably do
effects.
some
I think
sort
we
of, like...
Yeah, they
posi-
could
not
just do a
positronic,
puppet.
animatronic
Yeah.
thing for the
Yeah, if
arms.
he's just gonna sit at the navigation station,
Mm.
just have like a puppet like built into the bridge right there.
Oh, as in, it's just a full puppet? Like, not even a
Yeah,
that
person
would-
prosthetic?
I mean, that's-
Buckley was great. I don't know. I think they could do it. You know.
Buckley looked incredible, and I loved that, you know, the original Gorn episode. Like I was saying earlier, it was a dude in a rubber suit, and then here in 2022, we're still doing a dude in a rubber suit, and we've gotten pretty damn good at it because Buckley was a great design. He was a very likable dude too. It was sad. I thought that was impactful. You know, I cared about him just in that small little introduction, and then when he died, I was like, oh no, I hate that this is happening. Even though it felt way too familiar because I've seen Alien. So.
Yes, and I guess, you know, we also had in this episode, oh, let's introduce some other named characters. I'm sure, hope nothing bad will happen to them. With Cadet Chia and Duke, Lieutenant Duke, was
Lieutenant
it?
Duke, yeah.
Poor Duke
Yeah.
just got promoted.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was also telegraphed.
It was very telegraphed. They were like, okay, we need some people to kill. We cannot kill the main cast. So let's have a scene at the beginning of the episode where we introduce some people. Like, I think it would have been nice if we see, like, Cadet Chia in the Illyrian episode, in Uhura's quarters. I think that would have then worked well, because then we would have at least known that they exist. But in this episode, when it's like, oh,
Yeah.
only you and Cadet Chia are cadets on the ship, it's like, have we not seen them before? But I
know,
guess
like-
medical science, yeah.
Lower Decks is like introduced characters in the background prior to like their proper
Yes.
introduction when like they actually start doing something. Like, you know, like if you go back and watch the first 2 seasons of Lower Decks, you see like Fletcher and Jennifer and
Jet.
Jennifer.
and Jet. Yeah, you see a lot of them, you know, walking around in the background before they actually ever speak or do anything. So that's a cool thing, you know, they can do in that show when they're probably
It's probably
doing
easier to do in
animation
that show. Yeah.
Yeah, like they already know like these characters are going to be like in future scripts when they're finishing the animation on earlier episodes, so they can kind of toss that stuff in there.
Also,
But
they
yeah, it
don't
would have been
need
cool to have
to-
seen more of them.
They don't need to cast them yet as well. Whereas
Right.
with background characters in live action, you do need to cast them. So then you need that more foreknowledge that you're going to use them. And I mean, I think Stranger Worlds has done a really good job of having that we know what we're going to do, so we want to seed it in earlier. You know, with Hemmer saying, I fixed what's broken, with the Gorn stuff in episode 4, I believe it is, and just this other stuff seeded in earlier episodes. But, you know, there's always we can look back and be like, oh, but they could have done it better. But we should still appreciate that they did it in the first place, and it wasn't just, what do we do this week? Let's just write something. So yeah.
Sure. And as
What
far
about
as
you
like
guys?
setting
What-
stuff up like that,
Yeah. What?
I was just curious what
uh,
species you wanted to return, but finish your thought, Fathery.
I was just gonna say, and then I'll answer if that's okay. But I was just gonna say, you know, as far as setting stuff up, when Hemmer did say way back, you know, first time we heard it in the character promo before the show even came out, when he said, the Enar believe that, you know, we're here until we complete our purpose, and my purpose is to fix what is broken. I even thought then, like, that kind of sounds like something, a guy would believe before he goes and, like, self-sacrifices. I wonder if, like, at some point in the show, like, he's gonna die. So I kind of always thought that was possible, but I did not expect it to be the 9th episode of Strange New Worlds. But as far as who I would like to see, replace them, or if they're going to bring on like a new species or something, someone that be like the new weird alien, I would love to see a Tellarite engineer. They're supposed to be like good engineers anyways. We've never had a Tellarite as a regular character. Larry Nemechek's out there somewhere is going to be banging that drum, trying to get a Tellarite on the show because he's like a #1 Tellarite enthusiast. He likes to remind people Tellar Prime's the only founding world of the Federation we've never visited in any Star Trek, so it'd be cool to go there. I think that they will probably bring in Scotty at some point, though. Maybe they'll have like a revolving door on the ship, kind of how Discovery does. Like people come and go on Discovery. We had Lorca, we had Pike, Tilly came and went, Saru came and went. Adira and Gray have come and gone. People transfer on, transfer off, whatever. Yeah, another good example. So we could, if the end of this episode, if we're saying goodbye to La'an and Uhura, because Pike did say like, and Hemmer as well, but like all three of them, kind of seem to be exiting the ship at least temporarily. Pike says the cadets will still be on board for a couple of weeks, but then they're going to be gone. So that kind of sounds like Uhura will be here for the finale, and then she's going to be gone in season 2. It's basically how I read that when I heard the characters say that. So I don't really want to see any of these people go, or I don't want to see any of the actors, lose their job and get laid off. But I think it would be a neat idea if they were able to kind of cycle people in and out and on and off the ship. And then, maybe we do eventually get to Scotty, or we do eventually get to Dr. McCoy, or my crazy theory that at some point M'Benga dies, Joseph M'Benga dies, and then we learn, he has a younger brother named Jubilo M'Benga who's currently interning on Vulcan. So that's just my crazy theory. I'm just throwing it out there. But
shut your mouth. That's interesting.
That's an interesting one. But talking about this revolving door, one very interesting thing from the books is that for the Enterprise, the chief engineer's position was usually referred to as a revolving door. The number of chief engineers that came onto the Enterprise and then left, like within a year, was very high. So we could, with them having taken some inspiration from the books and comics, they could definitely do that for live action. We've already got Pike sees his future, which was first seen in a comic and then seen in Discovery. And we could definitely get some very interesting chief engineers, which some of the books have some really great engineers, which I would actually love to see.
Was that one of the Marvel comics, the early Voyages
that
came out in the 90s?
Yes.
Oh, nice. I need to try to find all those issues, but I bet they're, kind of people are overcharging for them right now with Pike being popular.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Fathery, one little point on Uhura. I think that the show implies strongly that she's deciding to stay after Hemmer's sacrifice, that it like inspires her to stay with that end shot where she's looking over at the station. But also earlier in the show, Pike even says, "Oh, so you've decided to stay?" Like it's on the table. Like they've been tempting her and they've been asking her to stay. So I think she will.
Was she done at school? Like, does she still have to go back to the academy or something?
Or you can. I don't know how that works.
Right. We don't know what stage in her academics. Like, does she have enough credits to graduate, basically?
Yeah, and she would probably still need to go back to attend graduation.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but there could be a time gap between seasons, where graduation happens. It could be like, it's been 3 months since season 1, and Uhura just had her commencement ceremony, and now she's back.
Yeah, definitely. There was another thing in this episode which I was gonna mention, but it has completely escaped me. So I guess if there are any other questions, or if you two want to mention anything from this episode, but if there are any questions from the chat,
I think were you going to talk about Spock and his?
Spock. We're going to talk about Sam Kirk
and Chapel. Oh, Sam Kirk. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I
talking
was
about
trying to
Sam Kirk.
mention. So Sam Kirk very much had a little bit of a nervous breakdown in this episode and took it out on Spock. I saw a lot of people online being like, Kirk shouldn't have done that. It's not very Starfleet officer. But I mean, I very much saw it as just he's not really cut out for these high stakes, people are dying missions. In an
It
earlier
was a high
episode,
duress situation, right? Yeah.
in an earlier
Yeah.
episode, he says, "I'm not very good
He's
at conflict."
yeah, conflict. Yeah, he's conflict averse. It's true.
Yeah, so we
Mhm.
could see that, probably from this episode, maybe going forward, is that we could see then Sam Kirk trying to be like, is this the right job for me? And eventually be like, okay, I can't do this anymore. Every week we're getting into wacky adventures. I can't deal with that. I'm going to go to this research station planet, which definitely won't be attacked by giant flying pancakes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Poor Sam Kirk, man. This character is so doomed.
yeah.
He
But
is.
it's
Yeah.
great.
He's kind of like a Walking Dead, right? Dead man walking. But I'll defend the episode's writing with Sam Kirk in regards to Sam Kirk. I think they have an interesting balancing act. They want to make Jim Kirk be the cooler brother, obviously. So they don't want Sam to be like as big of a Starfleet badass as his brother. But I liked that when they had his breakdown here when he starts wigging out, and Mbenga even offers Pike like, if you want, I can give him a sedative. And Pike says, no, I need everyone to have a clear head. Sam's tougher than he looks. And then at the end, Sam comes through. Sam actually saves the life of Spock. Like I know it happens quick, but let's not overlook that. If Sam Kirk
Yeah, it's a
had
good
not
point.
have been where he was, Spock would have been killed by Gorn. He would have been trapped between two Gorn, getting his flesh ripped from his bones, and so Sam Kirk came through in the clutch. So it was an interesting balancing act of he can't be as badass as his brother, but we're still going to make him kind of cool. And I know some people were a little bothered by like the use of language, like when he calls him a pointy-eared computer or whatever. And that was very like not only like Dr. McCoy, but also if you go back and watch Enterprise and see how Archer and Trip talk about Vulcans, they weren't exactly fans of the Vulcans either. So I think it does kind of have a presence in the universe. We can debate if that should be handled differently, going forward and with modern perspectives. But I think it worked in the episode. I'll defend it.
Yeah, and talking about, he's tougher than he looks, we do have to consider from the fact that, the only instance of George Kirk, their father, is from 2009, and we see just how strong he is from the fact that he sacrifices his life to disable the Narada.
In an alternate timeline. But
yes, but
we don't know his fate.
That
in
no,
the
no.
prime
But
timeline,
what I'm meaning is, that instance is the exact instance of the split. So he's still the same character in that moment as he is in that moment in Prime. So we know that he's a strong, capable Starfleet officer, and knowing that both his children who join Starfleet are that is actually really nice.
Yeah,
they were raised by a dude who had some strength and resolve, and so you'd think those values would transfer.
I really support the choice of the writers to bring in this kind of like uglier side of humans and Sam Kirk, because it is something that is part of it's in the background for sure, as you referenced Enterprise, and also in TOS, the way we see Dr. McCoy and others react to Vulcans in high stress situations. There's a mistrust to them, and there's like a lot of history. So I think it was a really good choice, and also just from the perspective of Star Trek is always kind of like pushing the conversation and putting things that like are not necessarily things you want to see on a character out there, so that you can kind of learn from it. And I think this Sam Kirk situation does exactly that. I think we see a lot of examples of casual bigotry and racism, and I think it's going to be interesting to see if they continue to explore this. Sorry, I was talking lower too, so that's probably what happened. But to see if they continue to explore this aspect, and also just I think it's always good because we are facing a resurgence in bigotry and racism, and an emboldening of racists in society all over the world. So I think it's interesting to bring this topic to the table.
Yes, definitely. And I think a lot of the issue with that scene was how Pike dealt with it.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yes,
I
because
was disappointed in Pike.
he didn't really say, "Oh, you shouldn't say that." He just kind of let it be, which isn't really what you should do. And I wonder if he more put his personal feelings of Sam and knowing, oh, he's tougher than he looks, he doesn't mean that, ahead of doing what's right and saying, yeah, chill out. You don't need to say that. So, yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah.
Agreed.
But
we definitely need people to go back and rewatch Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, because we're definitely getting a higher rise of a lot of these old bigotries that I guess never really went away, but they're certainly inflamed in modern times.
Definitely. And we can hope that as we get more Trek going forward, it can look at these issues of modern times as Trek in the past has done, with great effect and creating great episodes that really dig at the heart of these issues, and hopefully get some good coming from that. But I think that's actually a really lovely place to go and ask chat if there's any questions you would like to ask about this episode, or just anything in general, I guess. And while you're getting your questions in, I guess we can talk about a very almost hot topic in the Trek community at the moment, caused by us, and that is this idea of a TOS reboot. And yes, I brought it up. If you are interested in reading our thoughts, and by our thoughts, I mostly mean Jack's thoughts, because I'll say my thoughts now. We have a article on trekcentral.net, and also a YouTube video which came out either yesterday or the day before, if anyone is interested to see what exactly we mean about is a TOS reboot coming. But Favre, what is your opinion on, now that we've got Uhura, we've got a Kirk, we've got a Spock, we've got a Chapel, we may get a Scotty, we may get a McCoy. What do you think of this idea of a TOS reboot?
I mean, to me, that doesn't seem like an obvious thing to do, or it actually seems like a very bad idea. So I was kind of surprised when I first heard people start talking about it. I don't know. I just thought of Strange New Worlds as being a prequel. Like I don't watch the Obi-Wan Kenobi show on Disney Plus and then think, oh my god, they have a Obi-Wan Kenobi actor, they have a Darth Vader actor, they could just like restart redoing the original trilogy, and just like shoot all those movies again, but with like these people. So it just seems like a really odd conclusion that people jump to. I think the reason why there might be kind of a conversation happening about it is some people would, I guess, they'd want to see the original series, but they have a harder time watching the older shows, or maybe like they don't like the effects or some of the acting or some of there was kind of casual uses of bigotry then written in less enlightened times. So maybe people just want to see all of that recreated in like a modern lens, but what do we do after that? We redo the Next Generation. A lot of that stuff has not aged well, and it's all these shows will become dated eventually. So just the idea of like remaking, rebooting, overwriting existing shows, it just seems like a very strange thing to me. Those are already streaming on Paramount Plus, so whenever they greenlight another show, my preference would be for it to be something different. I can already watch the original series. I don't need to watch a new attempt at it. I would prefer them, let's go to the 25th century. Let's show a different ship in the 23rd century, like anything.
Definitely.
Like there's so many more possibilities.
Yeah,
Also,
definitely.
Strange New Worlds is fulfilling that desire, I think, for a lot of people. It's kind of
Hmm.
set in the same time period, and it has a lot of the same like temperament and like going back to an episodic format and things like that. I think this is actually the cleverest way to retell the TOS kind of like, story, if you will, for a modern audience, but doing it respectfully and stuff like that, and and so on and so forth. So I think, to me, it is a little odd to imagine like after Strange New Worlds to keep going. Like, to me, it just makes sense to like just say, hey, watch the original series. Being said, what I do see a lot in my encounters of people saying, like, when I ask them why they don't watch the original series, like, of the same critiques that you had mentioned, and it is disheartening because, you know I think there's so having I do a regular discussion of the original series. We've been doing for over 2 years now, and going episode by episode, and there's so much value and
Mm.
and amazing,
Totally.
Yes.
a richness in the original series that I think I think it's a shame that people would miss out on the good by focusing on the bad parts of the original series and the things that are negatives. But I do, so I was surprised by it too, and I just don't think, like, I think, of course, like, Paul Wesley is going to be a big part of like whether or not a show like that could become a reality, like, depending on how people react to Captain Kirk. But I also, I'm like 100%, if I had to put my investment somewhere, it would be in a 25th century show. I think that where Star Trek should go next. It's a balance of like, I think that's a great place to be because you could tell new stories, like, and go further into the future. But because of Discovery being set in the 32nd century, it also has the opportunity to play with the past a little bit, and it has the opportunity to be like, give us some of that prequel-y type of feel as well, like hinting at what's to come.
Yes, definitely. One thing I want to mention is Uncle Arthur in chat asks, I think Scotty is coming. My question for the host is next week or next season. I would say next season, mainly because it looks like next week's very soon and very action-packed. So I think the introduction of Scotty into that would be maybe a bit too much. And take away from the episode. And I think very much, starting off a season and being like, oh, Pike, we have a new chief engineer. He's waiting for you in the shuttle bay. And then you see that it's Scotty would work better than him just appearing in the final episode. Or it could be a cliffhanger. That's a possibility. But I definitely would say next season over next week. What are your guys' thoughts on Scotty? Would he appear next week or next season?
I don't think
Safi,
Father is allowed to answer
Yeah,
because
full disclosure, I have seen the finale, so I know.
You
I
can
can
definitively say yes or no, but you are
I
contractually obliged to
I
not
will
say
not-
anything.
I will not respond to that question.
That's fair enough.
We'll all know very soon in a few days.
Yes,
So
in a few days. But Starfleet Boy,
I'm gonna guess that he appears next episode, just at the very end or something like that.
okay.
That's my
So
guess.
we got one vote for each
yeah,
between the two of y'all.
and
so
one abstain.
we'll
yeah.
find out who's right, who's wrong,
Yes,
who lives, who dies, who tells the story.
and some people wanting a Captain Garth to appear in Strange New Worlds, which would be definitely interesting to see his rise and very weird
And fall.
Yes.
Garth of Izar.
Garth of Izar, yes.
They could do it. That's an option. That's on the table, I suppose.
Yes. What about a series set after TOS and before the motion picture? So Monster Maroon, Lost Era, maybe.
Well,
no.
Between the motion picture and the Wrath of
TOS.
Khan.
I would say between the motion picture and Wrath of Khan, I'd really like that.
Now,
or even
that I would
between Undiscovered Country and Generations. I think
Now we're talking.
now we're
like
talking.
that.
Because that is
that's a
a
great-
era which has nothing in it, basically. Like, the Enterprise
Except
B
Captain
did
Harriman
some
and
things,
Captain Garrett.
and then the Enterprise C, its only crowning achievement was getting blown up, basically. and I'm sure some other fascinating stuff happened. And just to see the Monster Maroon, because that's like the longest running uniform in Starfleet.
Yeah, the weirdest one.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
more
they had it for 80
militaristic
something
one.
years.
Longest running uniform. I forgot about that.
Yeah, it lasts a while. The budget department, the uniform department of Starfleet had some budget cuts during the 23rd
Well, they
century.
even lose the undershirt, and then they lose the belt at some point, and it becomes like like a different sort of.
Yeah, that's
kind of
unfortunate because I love the Enterprise C. I'm actually a big fan of the Ambassador class. The Starship Texas that I broadcast my content from as the USS Texas NCC 26302 as an Ambassador class. Because I think that design is great and it doesn't get enough love. But I do hate the Enterprise C uniforms when they lose the turtlenecks and the belts.
Yes,
that's
it
weird.
Is a really weird one. Valamis says, what about a brand new engineer played by Simon Pegg? And that's just Scotty again. And yeah, I think there needs to be a stand-in engineer. Uhura. I mean, Uhura doesn't have as much chief engineering knowledge. She's capable of fixing some things, but not running an entire
she's
ship.
Literally a cadet.
Yeah.
I don't think she could go from cadet to that.
She's like Wesley or Nog. You
Yes.
know, like she ain't chief level yet.
Definitely. Yeah, some promos for next episode are out there. Of course, we here at Trek Central will be doing a preview video on that, so expect that on Tuesday or Wednesday, where we'll compile all of the promo pictures, trailers, and more into a video, if anyone is interested for that. The people over at TrekCore on Twitter have said to put up your spoiler tags and everything for the finale. So it will definitely be an interesting one. So if you are spoiler averse, stay off social media or set up some mutes. If you are not spoiler averse and want to know everything that happens, you can either bribe Favre or you can go and watch our preview video on Tuesday or Thursday. But I think that is all for this week. Are there any last comments from either of you? Just about this episode or next episode or whatever?
Yeah, I just want to say that this season's been like an incredible season of Star Trek. Like, I'm really impressed with Strange New Worlds, and so I hope they stick the landing. I think they definitely will, based on what I saw in that preview. So I'm really excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can echo a lot of that. Also, I think that this has been a really great season. I said I didn't like this last episode, but I also tried to make it clear I thought it was a very good and well made, just wasn't what I wanted. But 8 out of the 9 released episodes, I really liked. So it was a very, very good track record so far. We'll be back to talk about the finale next week. And,
Yes.
I would just like to ask people, if they haven't already, you can give a subscribe to Starfleet Boy and to my channel over on Text Trek. We would certainly appreciate it. This crowd that is watching the live stream with us right now, the Trek Central crowd, it's so cool. There's so many great people I see commenting away in the live chat. But a lot of these are like the same familiar faces that show up over when we do our content. So if you like the crowd, if you like the community here, please follow them over to our content and check out some of the stuff we're doing.
Yes, definitely. And yeah, I will say with this episode, very much like Favre, not what I wanted, but I enjoyed it and still thought it was a good episode. And definitely looking forward to next week's episode. So yes, if you want to, as we said, find out what happened next week, but also to keep up with any Star Trek news, lore, or more, subscribe to us on the YouTube channel. Down there, you can click a like button and a subscribe button. We also have socials on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and you can join us on our Discord server with all of those links in the description below. But I have to thank my 2 fabulous co-hosts for joining me today. for this very interesting talk, for this very interesting episode. I want to thank chat for being here to talk with us. Like Fabi said, a lot of you are regulars, and we love to see you here regularly. So thank you for coming. And I guess that's where we end. So, as always, live long and prosper.